The CalDigit TS5. It is the Thunderbolt dock that most Mac users should consider, in my opinion. It checks off all the boxes. So let's take a look at what's on front of the dock. So starting at the top, you have a pair of UHS 2 SD card slots, followed by a pair of USB-C ports. One can provide up to 20 watts of power, and one front audio combo jack for audio in and out. On the rear, you have separate audio in and audio outputs. You have a pair of USB 3 10 gigabits per second data ports, one USB-C, one USB-A. You have a USB-A, USB 2 port, 480 megabits per second, 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, and here's the star of the show in my opinion, 4 Thunderbolt 5 ports, 3 of those being downstream ports, one of them being an upstream 140 watt port to your connected host computer. That is really cool, and that's something that the TS5 Plus actually doesn't have. It only has 2 downstream ports. Now, design-wise, it's a typical CalDigit fare. You have the ridge design that helps dissipate heat with that aluminum, and those ridges serve a dual purpose. You can use the little feet that are included if you want to orient it in horizontal mode on your desk like this. That's the way I prefer it, but you can also stand it up in vertical orientation as well if you want to save some horizontal space on your desktop. Now let's compare it directly with the TS5 Plus. You'll see that the TS5 Plus not only comes in space black, but it's also noticeably larger. On front, you have an extra USB-A port, 10 gigabits per second, and that USB-C port that provides power can provide up to 36 watts versus 20 watts. So that's a big difference there. Now on the rear, you'll notice even greater differences. Obviously, you have 4 USB-A ports, all of them 10 gigabits per second ports. You have 3 USB-C data ports, all 10 gigabits per second. You have a display port, 2.1 port, 10 gigabit Ethernet versus 2.5 gigabit, and all the downstream Thunderbolt ports provide 36 watts of power versus 15 watts of power. And there are other advantages to the TS5 Plus, like dual USB controllers for faster speeds when connecting multiple SSDs. However, I think that most people are going to be perfectly fine with the CalDigit TS5, and you get that extra Thunderbolt downstream port. And you'll notice that the TS5 actually has a much smaller power brick. Just a little side note. But instead of just continuing to ramble off a bunch of figures, I want to show you actually how this thing benefits my setup here. And here it is. So the TS5 connects to my 16-inch MacBook Pro via a single Thunderbolt 5 cable, just like that goes directly to the upstream port on the TS5. That's it. Just that one cable and you're good to go. So the MacBook Pro is the brains, but the CalDigit TS5 is the veins, like the bloodstream. You get what I'm saying, right? The TS5 appears inconspicuous on this desktop, but in reality, it's what's making all these things work together seamlessly. And I'll just show you. Here is the rear of the TS5. You can see it is occupied by tons of cables, all neatly nestled into my IKEA desk. This first cable right here, that's going to a Thunderbolt 5 SSD. And as you can see, the speeds that Thunderbolt 5 provides is really good, up to a theoretical maximum of 6,200 megabytes per second. So yeah, your external drive is going to rival the speed of the internal Mac SSD. Now, another nice thing about the CalDigit setup here, what if you have a whole bunch of stuff connected? Well, they have this docking station utility where you can quickly eject everything in one fell swoop, so you don't get a bunch of warning messages when unplugging your dock. Now, this next port right here, that is one of 2 ports that goes to my Roadcaster Duo. This one's going to my Elgato capture card, and this one right here, that's going to my Roadcaster Duo as well. So I actually have 2 USB ports going to the Duo, and there's reasons for that, but I can explain that in another video. But here is the Roadcaster Duo with the dual USB I/O. So you can actually connect one of those ports to an iPhone or another Mac or the same Mac if you want to, and actually assign them to these faders independently. And that's so cool. I can actually show you how this works. Let me just show you real quick. 2026. So this is actually controlling just the music app. This fader, just the music app. So if I want to control the music app It's just that fader. And when I turn up the volume on my microphone, it mutes all the other channels, which is really cool. These right here, I've assigned, these are MIDI pads, and I've assigned those to launch specific apps. I'll show you that a little bit later. But I just wanted to just give you an overall overview of my setup here. Here are the dual headphone jacks on the back of the Roadcaster Duo. And here are the two TRS cables left and right that go to the Yamaha HS3 studio monitors. Great pair of monitors that are very inexpensive. So this right here goes to my right monitor, as you can see right here. And that is what that looks like. So just great sound from these for a relatively inexpensive price, which is what I need. And you also have a couple of combo jacks. This one goes to my Ableton Move. This one goes off to my Shure SM7DB, which is resting on this Elgato arm, which is surprisingly good, I have to admit. Now, you also have 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, so you don't get 10 gigabit Ethernet, which, you know, may be a bummer for some, but in most cases, 2.5 gigabit Ethernet is going to be perfectly fine, especially if you have like fiber connectivity. I have a fiber connection, which is 2.5 gigabits per second. And as you can see there, I am getting 2.5, actually greater than that according to this speed test here, but it's going to be in the ballpark of 2.5 gigabits per second. So here is the power input, and next to that is the Upstream Thunderbolt 5 cable that goes back to the Mac. So this one cable connects to your Mac and allows you to interface with all the other I/O, but it also is able to provide up to 140 watts of power to your MacBook Pro, which is great because the 16-inch MacBook Pro can accept up to 140 watts. So that's a wonderful provision. Next to the Upstream port, I have this Thunderbolt port, which is going to the Asus ProArt Display 6K. So this cable connects here on the rear of my Asus ProArt 6K display. And you can see this is the whole setup because I'm actually daisy chaining from the 6K to a 4K display from Asus as well. And you can see how everything's panned out there. 6K resolution. The 4K display is actually running at 120 hertz. It can go up to 144 hertz. But to be honest, macOS's external display support has always been a little bit confusing and convoluted, so I definitely recommend checking out the compatibility list on CalDigit's website. But most of the displays out there should be good. You can even connect dual Pro Display XDRs if you want to do that. All right, so here's all three of the displays, including the internal MacBook display. And you can see that 4K display is running in vertical mode, which is great. So like I said, I'm daisy chaining. So I have this cable right here going to this port on the 4K display in vertical mode right here. I love this vertical setup. It can go up to 144 hertz. I have it set at 120, which is great for reading social media timelines, articles, etc., etc. You see my makeshift headphone stand. This monitor also has a built-in calibrator, so I'm going to talk about that in a dedicated video for that ProArt 4K display. Stay tuned for that. Now, you'll also notice connected on the back of the 6K display, I have this cable right here. That's actually going to the OpsBot webcam, which is a PTZ webcam. Fancy, right? And then finally, this cable right here, that's going to this under desk setup. It's actually going to a CF Express reader and another SSD that is daisy chained via Thunderbolt. So that is the entire setup. And this is what it looks like when I'm using it. It is super nice. It's super compact and it's powered via a single MacBook Pro. One cable connection made possible by the CalDigit TS5, which sits inconspicuously on the desktop right under my display. And you can see on this side, the vertical display, I have the MIDI pads on the Roadcaster Duo that allow me to quickly jump between applications with just a tap. That's super nice. I like that I have the XDR display for the MacBook Pro so I can monitor HDR content when working in Final Cut Pro. And I have Touch ID there, obviously within arm's reach. And that, of course, is super handy. Now, I spoke about the Roadcaster Duo. It can do a ton of different things. Like I mentioned, those two USB ports. So you have all these different in and outputs. So I can actually assign a dedicated input to a specific application like Ableton Live in this case. So here's the result. So I'm playing via simple MIDI controls on my keyboard. But But here's the cool part. Ableton Live gets its own dedicated fader on the Roadcaster. So that's not affecting any of the other audio on my Mac, just Ableton Live. And I can do that with any application. And I've done it with other applications like the music app, for instance. Pretty handy. And like I mentioned earlier, you have these MIDI pads that you can assign to do all sorts of different things. I have it set up to switch between applications just like that on the vertical display. Now, the front of the TS5, of course, has that 20-watt USB-C port. It's not as powerful as the 36-watt port on the TS5 Plus, but still good enough for a wireless charger and getting faster charging via that wireless charger. So here, I can just connect like that, and it's wirelessly charging my iPhone at 20 watts. Another cool thing about the TS series of docks is that all these ports are offline charging compatible. So if I unplug the TS5 from my MacBook Pro, obviously everything disconnects. However, the TS5 Plus is still able to supply power via all the USB ports except for the USB 2 port to connected devices. So if I remove my MacBook and say I have something plugged in, like my wireless charger, like this, any of those connected devices will still charge even without a host connected. So that's super convenient for when you're coming and going throughout the day. You don't have to worry about making sure stuff stays charged up. So ladies and gentlemen, that is a look at the TS5. It really doesn't have any major flaws at all that I can think of. It's enough for most Mac users. It's $100 cheaper than the TS5 Plus at $399. And frankly, it's become a staple for my desktop setup. What do you guys think? Let me know down below in the comment section with your thoughts. Be sure to like and subscribe if you appreciate this video. This is Jeff Benjamin with 9to5Mac.